What would you do if, in the middle of your duty, while serving your country, you discovered that the person you trusted most had quietly erased your life behind your back? This isn't just about betrayal. It's about how some betrayals are carried out not with shouting or slamming doors, but with silence, signatures, and passwords changed in the dark. It's about how the people who smile at you in the morning can be the same ones planning your erasure by night. Today, you're going to hear a story of quiet strength, cold calculations, and justice served in the most unexpected way. A story. That reminds us, some men may walk away from a broken marriage, but others walk straight into the fire, with eyes open and a plan in hand. Before we begin, I invite you to reflect on this. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to realize you were just a piece in their game? Let me know in the comments if you've ever seen the signs but chose to stay silent. And if stories like this make you think twice, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded. Sometimes the quiet ones strike the hardest. My name is David Reyes. I was a staff sergeant and senior instructor at Fort Benning, training new recruits who were barely out of high school. On the morning of July 17th, just after sunrise and before roll call, I opened my email. There it was. Subject line: "Let's handle this like adults." The body of the message was 3 short sentences. Angela, my wife of 12 years, had filed for divorce. She'd already moved her things out, and she'd taken care of the finances. I knew exactly what that meant. Our shared accounts were empty. Our house, no longer just mine. A man named Leon, someone I'd never met, was apparently living there now. I read the email again, then again. Then I closed my laptop, stood up from the bunk, and walked toward the showers like nothing had happened. That's what the Army teaches you. Keep moving, focus, stay on mission. But inside, something was breaking. Not loud, not messy, quiet, like ice cracking under your feet. By the time I got back to my room, my face was dry. My jaw was set. I replied to the email with one word: noted. That was the moment I decided. I would not yell. I would not beg. I would finish this, quietly, completely, and on my own terms. I met Angela 13 years ago at a fundraiser in Dallas for wounded veterans. I had just returned from a deployment overseas and was still learning how to be normal again. How to sit still. How to sleep without my boots on. How to laugh without checking exits. She was different, confident, funny. The kind of woman who could make a whole room lean in just by lowering her voice. She wasn't intimidated by the uniform or the quiet that followed me everywhere. In fact, she seemed drawn to it. We talked for hours that night, and by the end of the week, I knew I didn't want to imagine a life without her. We married 6 months later, bought a modest house in El Paso using my VA loan. I made sure everything was under my name for simplicity, but after our first anniversary, I added her to the deed. "What's mine is yours," I told her. "That's how this works." At the time, it felt right. It felt permanent. The early years were good. She supported me, at least on the surface. She said she was proud of what I did, even when she didn't really understand it. Her father had run a landscaping business. Her mother was a nurse. There was no military tradition in her family, no idea of what it meant to have someone gone for 9 months at a time, with no real guarantee they'd come back. Still, she smiled through it. She sent care packages. She called during her lunch breaks. I came home to warm meals and the scent of vanilla candles. But over the years, the smiles thinned out. The warmth cooled. It was subtle at first. Less curiosity about my day, more interest in her phone. She took up Pilates, started spending weekends at networking retreats with her friend Monica, a realtor she'd met through a local business group. The trips became more frequent, and the explanations more vague. She began locking her phone, leaving the room to take calls and brushing me off with phrases like, "You wouldn't understand," or "It's just work stuff." I didn't press her. That's not who I am. I've lived long enough to know that some truths reveal themselves without needing to be chased. And besides, I was always leaving. Afghanistan, Germany. Then back to Fort Benning, where I trained infantry hopefuls on everything from tactical field strategy to silent movement in hostile terrain. That became my routine. Train, deploy, return. Repeat. Angela was my constant, or so I thought. 6 months before that email, I started noticing more than just the distance. She stopped saying, "I love you," unless I said it first. She stayed, out late on weeknights, and claimed her phone had died when I asked why she hadn't answered. She changed the passwords to our shared Netflix and Spotify accounts. It seems small, but in a marriage those are signs, tiny cracks in the foundation. One night I brought it up. She said I was being paranoid. "You're just used to control, David," she said. "Not everything's a mission." I remember sitting across from her at our kitchen table, thinking how strange it felt that the woman I'd trusted with my life now made me feel like an outsider in my own home. I didn't argue. I never raised my voice. That wasn't my way. Instead, I began to prepare. Quietly, without accusation or confrontation, I started taking steps to protect myself. I moved my important documents, my birth certificate, my VA loan paperwork, my late mother's silver necklace, into a storage unit I rented under a different name. I opened a separate bank account and redirected a portion of my military pay. There, just a fraction, nothing she'd notice. I called it a precaution, but deep down I knew. Part of me was already grieving a marriage I hadn't admitted was over. The night before my last assignment at Fort Benning, she kissed me on the cheek like she was saying goodbye to a coworker, not a husband. "Stay safe," she said, eyes dry. No tears. No tremble in her voice. I remember watching her walk away as I boarded the base shuttle, wondering when exactly she'd stopped seeing me as her partner and started seeing me as an obstacle. Still, I held on to hope. Foolish, maybe, but you don't survive combat zones without believing in the possibility of redemption. So I left, did my job, led my platoon, trained the next generation, and then, just as the summer sun rose over the training fields one morning, that email arrived and everything shattered. But the shattering wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't fire or fury. It was calculated, clinical. 3 sentences long. 12 years erased like they were an error on a spreadsheet. And that's when something inside me shifted, not into rage, but into clarity. The kind of clarity you get before a storm. I had always thought betrayal came with noise, but I was wrong. Sometimes it comes with silence and leaves footprints on your soul. That morning, after replying with nothing more than "noted," I went about my day as if nothing had happened. I ran drills, barked commands, corrected stances. My recruits didn't notice anything unusual, just another day, another lesson, another push through exhaustion. But beneath the surface, something had settled into place. A quiet resolve. I didn't break down. I didn't rage or vent. I analyzed, assessed, mapped the terrain of betrayal like I would an ambush zone. Because if there was one thing the Army had taught me, it was this: when you get hit, you don't panic. You regroup, you plan, you respond with precision. That evening, I returned to my quarters and logged into our joint bank account, or what was left of it. The balance had dropped to under $70. Just 2 weeks earlier, we had over $30,000 in savings, between a deployment bonus and some money we'd set aside to replace the water heater. Gone. I checked the transaction history and saw a series of withdrawals, first small, then massive. Transfers to an account number I didn't recognize. I checked the routing codes. All domestic, all under her name. No aliases, no effort to hide the trail. Just cold, confident theft. Clicked into our mortgage portal next. There it was, a recent refinance document, processed and signed digitally. It listed both our names, except something was off. The signature under David Reyes was wrong. Close, but off. The angle of the strokes, the way the D curved, unnaturally. It wasn't mine. I knew immediately what had happened. Angela had forged my digital signature to refinance the house, likely pulling out most of the equity. My heart thudded once, then went still. She'd taken a loan out in both our names, stolen the funds, then filed for divorce to cut me out before I could stop her. It was deliberate, premeditated. But that wasn't all. Attached to the documents was a note about a co-signer, Leon Ramirez. That name again. I didn't know him, but now he was everywhere. He was the one living in my house, the one driving my truck, according to a neighbor who'd texted me weeks earlier, asking if I was back in town. Saw your Tacoma in the driveway, thought you were home. I hadn't been, and the truck wasn't with me. It was with her. With him. I called my old friend Marcus. We'd served together back in Afghanistan, but he'd left the army to start a cybersecurity firm. Quiet guy. Brilliant with digital forensics. He picked up on the second ring. I didn't have to say much. Just, I need a trace, and I need it fast. By nightfall, Marcus had already begun pulling metadata, scanning, file origins, tracing account ownership. Within 24 hours, he confirmed what I suspected. Not only had Angela transferred funds to her own account, but she had also opened a shell LLC weeks earlier, Ramac Properties. The listed agent, Leon Ramirez. I stared at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't some messy emotional collapse. It was a scheme, a calculated financial ambush, executed while I was busy training men to defend this country. The timeline made everything clearer. Angela had started the process 2 months before I left for Fort Benning. The forged refinance had gone through 3 weeks after I deployed. The large cash withdrawal? Exactly 1 week before the email arrived. And still, I hadn't heard from her. No calls, no explanations. Just that one cold message and total silence after. I checked our home security system, an app she probably forgot I still had access to. The front porch camera was still active. I clicked in. A live view popped up, and there he was. Leon, stepping out onto my porch with a beer in hand, laughing into his phone like he owned the place. A moment later, Angela appeared in the frame. She kissed him. They sat down together on the same swing I'd installed the summer before. I watched them smile like nothing was wrong, like I didn't exist. But I didn't feel rage. I felt focus. I started a checklist, not on paper, on muscle memory. Step 1, document everything. Screenshots, PDFs, logs. Step 2, secure communications. I bought a burner phone, one she couldn't trace. Step 3, contact legal. I reached back out to Marcus, who connected me with a private legal contact. Someone who'd worked with military divorce cases, especially those involving fraud and asset concealment. Step 4, build the timeline. If I was going to expose this, I'd need a perfect map, dates, signatures, messages, accounts, and evidence. Every move she made was a move I could reverse. Every lie she told was a rope she'd use to hang herself. And step 5, wait. Because some battles aren't won with force. They're won with precision, with strategy, and with patience. That night, before lights out, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. She thinks she's 2 moves ahead, but she has no idea I've already started the end game. The next few days were a blur of quiet preparation. I kept my head down at the base, went through the motions, all while feeding Marcus every scrap of digital information I could get my hands on. He worked like a machine, searching court filings, tracing bank transfers, running IP checks on email, activity, even digging into Leon Ramirez's background. What he found chilled me. Leon wasn't just a random boyfriend. He had a rap sheet, 2 DUIs, a suspended real estate license in New Mexico, and a dismissed fraud charge tied to a home renovation scam 5 years back. Nothing stuck, but the pattern was there. And now, with Angela by his side, it looked like they were running something bigger and smarter. Marcus flagged one particular email chain between Angela and someone named Teresa Pike. The subject line, listing agreement. The content, instructions for staging our home, suggestions for minimal upgrades, and details about timing the listing for maximum buyer traffic. Angela had forwarded the mortgage refinance paperwork as proof of ownership. She had listed our I want my home for sale. But the name she used was Angela Reyes Pike. She'd added a fake last name, likely to avoid raising red flags when submitting forged documentation. Worse, she had listed Raymac Properties LLC, her and Leon's shell company, as the seller. She was trying to flip our house before the divorce, even processed. They weren't just stealing from me. They were preparing to erase me altogether from the narrative, sell my home under a different name, and move on like I never existed. I knew then this wasn't just a betrayal. This was fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. And if they'd done it to me, they'd do it again to someone else. Maybe already had. I sent all the documents to my legal contact, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney named Sandra Blake, who specialized in military family fraud cases. Sandra didn't flinch. "You've got the start of something big here," she said during our first secure video call. "But we'll need a lot more to press charges. Right now, it's all circumstantial. Emails, screenshots, digital traces. We need hard evidence. We need the money trail. And we need them talking." That's when the plan started to form. Contacted Jillian Tran, a local investigative reporter who'd done a series on real estate scams in the Southwest. She was cautious at first, skeptical. But when I sent her the fake refinance papers, the bank records, and the video footage of Leon in my house, she went silent. Then she said, "Give me a week." While Jillian did her digging, I focused on securing my identity. I froze all joint financial accounts, alerted the bank to suspected fraud, and placed an alert on my credit reports. I also filed a temporary injunction with the help of Sandra to prevent the sale of the house. The court hadn't processed it yet, but the wheels were turning. If Angela tried to finalize the deal, she'd trip a legal wire. I was laying traps, one by one. 3 nights. Later, Marcus called with new intel. He dug into the metadata of Angela's messages with Teresa Pike and found a familiar address, Elgin Air Base. That's where Sergeant Harlow, a friend of mine from my early deployment days, was currently stationed. Angela had sent emails from that location and the recipient of one bank transfer, Harlow's ex-wife. Suddenly, this wasn't just my story. It was bigger. Angela and Leon had done this before, at least twice. They'd targeted military spouses left behind during deployment or training cycles, took advantage of the trust, of the distance, of the silence, and flipped homes out from under men too busy serving to notice until it was too late. I sent all of this to Jillian. The next morning, she called back. "I spoke to Harlow," she said. "He's devastated. Same story. Came back to an empty house, cleaned out accounts, divorce papers waiting on the kitchen counter. He never connected the dots until now." That's when Jillian offered to bring the FBI in, Financial Crimes Division. She said she had a contact, Agent Keller, who'd been tracking similar patterns across 3 states. I didn't hesitate. "Do it," I said. "I'm tired of playing defense." By the end of the week, Agent Keller was on a call with me and Sandra. He'd been following a network of property fraud cases involving shell companies, forged refinance, documents, and real estate sales targeting vulnerable homeowners. "Your case could break it open," he said, "especially if we can catch them discussing the sale in real time." That's when I remembered the cameras. Before I deployed, I'd installed an internal security system, motion-sensitive, cloud-synced, full audio. Angela had probably assumed I deactivated it. She never changed the login credentials. I accessed the dashboard and downloaded the last 30 days of footage. There they were, Angela and Leon, walking through my living room with a stranger, pointing at the walls, laughing about renovations. In one clip, Leon says, "We'll flip it and be out by spring." That was the nail in the coffin. Sandra packaged the footage and legal documentation. Jillian passed it along to Agent Keller, and Marcus traced the final few wire transfers, 2 of which were headed to a holding account used for staging escrow. They were days away from finalizing the sale. I stood at the edge of something massive, deeper than I had imagined. My marriage had crumbled, my finances had been gutted, but what I'd uncovered was a coordinated scheme targeting those who serve, exploiting their absence and banking on their silence. But they had picked the wrong man to stay silent. The decision to return home without warning wasn't emotional. It was tactical. By then, the FBI had enough to move forward, but timing was everything. Agent Keller wanted one last piece, a live exchange, a direct link between Angela, Leon, and the fraudulent sale. So I requested emergency leave. No social media updates, no phone calls to family, no sign of my movement. I flew commercial under my middle name, landed in El Paso just after midnight, and checked into a low-cost motel 20 minutes from our old neighborhood. I didn't sleep. I watched the front porch camera instead. Angela came out twice, once to walk the dog and once to smoke, a habit she picked up after I left, apparently. She looked relaxed, comfortable, no sign of guilt. No idea the man she thought she'd erased was just down the road. The next morning, I called Marcus. He'd finished cloning Angela's laptop using a backup sync and found emails confirming the staging date. "They're showing the house on Thursday," he said. "Same fake name, same agent, and the buyers are already lined up." I called Jillian. "It's time." She coordinated with Agent Keller, who reached out to the local field office. Thursday, they said. They'd be ready. But I wasn't done. I needed to see it with my own eyes. That afternoon, I drove past the house slowly, windows up, sunglasses on. Nothing had changed from the outside. Same shutters, same porch swing I'd built with my dad. But the car in the driveway wasn't mine. It was Leon's, and my truck, the one I had spent 3 years restoring, was parked behind it. I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger, not grief, just focus. I parked 4 houses down and waited. At 2:30 p.m., a white SUV pulled into the driveway. A couple stepped out, dressed sharp, mid-30s, probably the buyers. A woman with a clipboard met them, Teresa Pike. She smiled and shook their hands, motioning toward the door. Moments later, Angela appeared. She wore the same blouse I had bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She was laughing, welcoming them into my house like it was hers to give away. And behind her, Leon followed, holding what looked like a sales folder. This was it. I texted Jillian, who was sitting a block away with a camera crew. "They're in." She replied instantly. "Feds moving in now." Less than 10 minutes later, 2 black vehicles rolled up and parked diagonally across the street. 4 agents in plain clothes stepped out. One walked calmly to the front door and knocked. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw the moment. It shifted. Leon stepped back. Angela stiffened. Then came the badges, the questions, the rising panic. The agents entered. 15 minutes later, Leon was led out in handcuffs. Angela followed, not cuffed yet, but her face was pale, stunned. She looked around the neighborhood as if searching for something, maybe me. I didn't move. I met Agent Keller at the Federal building that evening. He was direct, no theatrics. "We got what we needed," he said, sliding a manila folder across the table. Inside were still images from the sting. Angela discussing the sale, Leon confirming forged paperwork, the couple signing pre-closing documents. The buyers were cooperating, he added. They had no idea what was going on. I nodded. "And the house?" "Frozen," he said. "We filed an emergency injunction. No sale will go through without your written consent. You're safe." I should have felt relief, closure, maybe even satisfaction. But all I felt was exhaustion. Years of marriage reduced to lies and paperwork, but I wasn't done yet. The next day, I met with Sandra and filed an official fraud report, naming Angela and Leon as co-conspirators. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the stolen money, the attempted property sale. The FBI had already begun coordinating with prosecutors across 2 states. Jillian, in the meantime, was preparing to publish a feature story titled The Betrayal Blueprint: How Military Families Are Being Targeted from Within. She promised to keep my name anonymous, for now. Later that week, Angela finally reached a single text. "David, we need to talk. I didn't know it would go this far." I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, "When did it start?" 3 dots appeared. then disappeared, then again. Finally, her reply, "After your second deployment." I felt alone. Leon helped at first. Then he had ideas. He said we could build something new. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. But that night I opened the security app again. I rewatched a clip of her standing in our kitchen, barefoot, pouring wine into a glass from the bottle I had brought home on my last trip. She handed it to Leon. They clinked glasses, smiled, kissed. That was the moment I knew forgiveness wasn't part of this story. The fallout came fast. Leon was denied bail, too many priors. Angela was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and falsifying financial documents. She pled not guilty at first, but changed her plea after the evidence was presented. Her lawyer contacted Sandra asking for a deal. I agreed, under conditions. She would sign a sworn statement confessing to the forgery. She would return the remaining funds, and she would surrender all rights to the house, my pension, and any future claims. In return, I wouldn't push for the maximum sentence. Sandra said I was being generous. But it wasn't about that. It was about finishing this, on my terms. A month later, I stood on the front lawn of my reclaimed house, alone. The FBI tape was gone. The locks had been changed. I walked through each room, touched the walls, the banister, the scuffed floorboard near the dining table. Every piece of it held a memory, but it also held the truth. Not everything can be restored. Some things you don't fix, you replace, you build again, and I was ready to rebuild, not just a house, a life, one brick at a time. In the weeks that followed, the media storm exploded. Gillian Tran's article dropped on a Sunday morning with a headline that sliced like a blade. Stolen Valor, How Con Artists Target the Homes of Deployed Soldiers. The story went viral. Without naming me, she exposed the network that Angela and Leon had operated under the cover of romance and real estate. The piece outlined how military spouses were being manipulated, how documents were forged, how vulnerable men were losing not just their money, but the lives they thought were waiting for them when they came home. Within 48 hours, other victims began to step forward, men from Kentucky, California, Arizona, all with eerily similar stories, all blindsided while serving, all stripped of trust. The FBI launched a wider operation. Leon's involvement in the scams turned out to be more extensive than we thought. He had connections to at least 3 fake LLCs, each tied to fraudulent property flips or refinance deals involving military homes. Angela's name popped up again and again, sometimes directly on documents, other times behind burner email accounts. The government was building a conspiracy case, and for once it wasn't just a line in a courtroom. It was real, tangible, and I was standing at the center of it. Angela, meanwhile, was unraveling. Her lawyer contacted Sandra 3 times in 1 week, pleading to renegotiate the deal. She didn't know everything, he claimed. She was manipulated, but by then the evidence was ironclad. Angela may not have understood the full scale of Leon's scheme, but she knew enough. She had forged my signature. She had moved funds. She had hosted buyers in my home under a false name. She wasn't innocent. Maybe not a mastermind, but not a bystander either. I agreed to one final amendment to our settlement. In addition to surrendering all financial claims, Angela would record a video confession, not for the court but for the record. For me. The camera rolled as she sat in a gray interview room, hair pulled back, voice barely above a whisper. She admitted to the forgery, to the shell company, to the fact that she knew Leon had done this before. She looked into the lens and said, "I thought I could control it. I thought David would never come back." That was her truth, or at least the part she was willing to speak aloud. I never watched the video more than once. Instead, I focused on something else. Closure. I sold the house. Couldn't stand to live in it anymore. Too many shadows. Too many moments replaying, in my mind like ghosts. I used part of the money to buy a small property in northern Arizona, quiet, sparse, surrounded by open sky and dry hills. I built a workbench in the garage and started fixing things. Tables, chairs, cabinets. My hands needed to create, to shape something solid again. Something that wouldn't betray me. I adopted a rescue dog, medium-sized, golden fur, sharp eyes, named her Liberty. She followed me everywhere, even into the shop. At night, she'd curl up beside me, breathing steady and warm like an anchor. One afternoon, I got a call from Agent Keller. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "Leon took a plea deal, 8 years federal prison. He gave up 3 names in exchange for a lighter sentence. Angela's not one of them." I didn't ask who the others were, it didn't matter. "And Angela?" I asked. "Probation plus restitution, 5 years supervised, travel restrictions, no access to financial accounts without court approval." He paused. "She moved to Denver, staying with her sister apparently." I thanked him, not because I cared where she was, but because it marked the end, the final period at the end of a long, bitter sentence. After we hung up, I went outside, sat on the back porch, and watched the desert fade into dusk. No drama, no tears, just peace. Hard-earned, but real. Sometimes I wondered if I should have seen it coming earlier. If I had ignored signs or made excuses too long. But those thoughts never lasted. Because the truth was, trust isn't a weakness. It's a risk we take when we believe in love. And I had believed. Fully. Deeply. That wasn't my shame. That was hers. A month later, I got an email from Jillian. "Just wanted you to know," she wrote. "Your story inspired 2 new investigations. FBI thinks it may have been a larger network. Your evidence helped crack the door open." She attached a scanned letter from a man in San Diego. Another Army vet. He wrote, "I thought I was crazy. I thought I was the only one. Your case gave me the courage to come forward. Thank you for speaking when the rest of us were still silent." I printed that letter, framed it, put it above my workbench, because when everything else had fallen apart, my marriage, my trust, my home, what was left wasn't just survival. It was impact. And in the quiet, in the sawdust and desert winds, I started to feel whole again. Not because I got revenge, but because I got something better. The truth. And the chance to rebuild something no one could ever take from me again. Time has a strange way of stretching when you're healing. Some days felt like I'd come miles from that morning I opened the email. Other days, I'd wake up with her, voice still echoing in my mind, or catch myself wondering if the life I used to have was ever real at all. There were mornings I stood barefoot on the back porch, coffee in hand, staring into the desert horizon, and feeling a strange mix of relief and ache. The betrayal didn't disappear, it just became quieter. It settled deep like a scar you stop noticing until the light hits it just right. And yet, despite the weight of it, I kept moving forward. I worked with my hands. I walked Liberty before sunrise. I sanded wood, built tables, fixed fences, and restored more than just broken chairs. I restored myself piece by piece. I didn't chase updates about Angela or Leon anymore. When Sandra sent legal notices or summaries, I read them once and filed them away. The emotional charge had gone. It wasn't about revenge now, it was about reclaiming peace. But the world had a way of reminding me of the impact. A story would appear in the news about another military spouse defrauded, or a new name would be added to the list of people coming forward thanks to Jillian's article. In a way, I'd become the beginning of a crack in the wall, a place where truth had broken through. And even though I hadn't asked for that role, I embraced it. One day, Sandra called and said the court wanted a victim impact statement from me for Leon's sentencing. I hesitated at first. Part of me didn't want to revisit it, to dive back into that fire after I'd worked so hard to climb out. But another part of me knew it was necessary, not for closure, not even for justice, but for the record. For every soldier who never got a chance to speak. For every man who came home to an empty house and a frozen account and never got to ask why. So I sat down at my workbench, cleared the dust, and wrote. "You didn't break me," I began. "You exposed what needed to be rebuilt." I wrote about the stolen money, the forged signature, The way I watched strangers walk through my living room on camera while I sat helpless hundreds of miles away. I wrote about how betrayal doesn't always arrive with shouting. It comes with silence, with calm manipulation, with the calculated cruelty of people who think they'll never be caught. But I also wrote about what came after, about rebuilding something real, about finding peace not in punishment but in truth. The court read my statement during sentencing. Leon didn't look up. Angela wasn't there. I wasn't surprised. By then she had disappeared into another life, restricted by probation, supervised finances, and the residue of a name now tied to a federal case. I had no interest in where she was, who she blamed, or what story she told herself to sleep at night. My story was done. After the hearing, I drove home, stopped at a roadside diner I hadn't been to in years, and ordered the same thing I used to after long drills: 3 eggs, toast, black coffee. The waitress smiled and asked if I wanted anything else. I shook my head. "No," I said. "This is exactly what I need." It wasn't just about the food. It was the return to something honest. Something mine. That night, back home, I stood on the porch while Liberty paced the yard, nose twitching in the breeze. I looked up at the stars, sharp, quiet, infinite, and thought about how close I had come to losing everything. Not just my house or money, but my identity, my belief in people, and how easy it would have been to stay bitter, to let cynicism build a wall around my heart. But I didn't, because in the wreckage, I found something stronger than anger: clarity, integrity, and the reminder that no matter how deeply someone tries to bury you, you still get to choose whether you stay underground or rise. Eventually, I packed away the files, the court transcripts, the printed emails and photographs. I didn't throw them out. I just put them in a box labeled closed. I wasn't going to live in that chapter anymore. I had new ones to write, better ones, quieter maybe, but real. And this time, built with eyes open, heart guarded, and hands steady. Stories like this aren't rare. They're just rarely talked about. Behind every headline about fraud or betrayal, there's a person quietly trying to pick up the pieces of a life they thought was secure. I was one of them. And if you've made it this far, you know how quickly everything I built, my marriage, my home, my trust, was nearly erased by someone I loved. What happened wasn't just a broken heart or a failed relationship. It was a calculated violation, a legal ambush disguised as a domestic crisis. And the worst part? It happens more than we'd like to believe. For years, we've told men to be strong, to carry burdens without complaint, to man up and move on. But what no one teaches us is how to deal with being emotionally manipulated, financially exploited, and left to rebuild from nothing. No one hands you a manual when the betrayal comes from inside your home. No one tells you how to survive when the person you trusted most uses your silence against you. That's why I chose to speak now, not to relive the pain, but to name it. To show that you can walk through hell with your dignity intact, and that sometimes quiet strength is the loudest answer to betrayal. This story, in the end, wasn't just about Angela or Leon or the house I lost. It was about something bigger. It was about how justice can still be served, not through revenge, but through truth, action, and strategy. It was about the power of staying calm when everything around you is chaos, about making moves, not noise. And it was about the reminder that even in your lowest moments, you still have agency. You can protect your name, you can expose the lies, and you can rebuild. Not just what was taken, but something better. So if you've ever felt that gut instinct telling you something was wrong, listen to it. If you've ever stayed silent because you didn't know where to begin, start here. Talk, document, prepare. And above all, know that there's strength in stillness, wisdom in waiting, and courage in refusing to be erased. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of someone in your life, leave a comment below. Your voice might help someone realize they're not alone. And if you believe more men need to hear stories like this, real, raw, and honest, subscribe to the channel. Share this video and let's bring these conversations into the light. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak.